everything? Hey Terry, how was your trip?
At this
How's it going, Alice?
The baby just threw up on me, all over me.
I'm sorry, that's not funny. Would you like to be excused to take care of yourself?
No, he threw up like 20 minutes ago all over me. That's why but can I turn off my camera? I need to comfort this. It's been a really rough week.
Alice, why don't you we're just gonna read a little bit more in the book. So
I don't really feel like watching the recording when I get home though. So
you don't. Okay. You can go
I'm
off.
I'm gonna keep it, and if I miss anything, I'm gonna watch the recording, I guess. But I'm just.
Alice, is the baby sick?
He wasn't sick until this morning when I got here.
Brian has the money, Dr. Angela. I'm sorry, Alice. Hey Terry, how are your travels, dear?
They were really good.
Where did you go this time? I can't keep track.
We went to Kansas and La Salette.
And what's in Kansas? Yep.
My sister's out there, and we had some friends getting married, so we went out there for the wedding.
Nice.
Yeah.
Did you have any problems with the rain and the flooding and all that, or were you home before that all happened?
No, I think we were home before it all happened.
Yes. And your brother's in La Salette, and this is his first year?
Mm-hmm.
And how's he doing?
He's good. He's ready to come home, though. He's
Yeah. When do they get done?
They get out June 11th.
Oh, so he's still got another month. Oh, that's painful.
Yeah.
But then they don't start till mid-September, right?
Yeah.
Okay, that's not terrible. Ugh.
well, students will end up doing the 14th something, and they start August 12th, I guess. That's what I heard.
That's a really short summer. Super short. Nina and Coco, you are 1 day away.
Except for Albert.
Coco, let's see you.
1 minute.
So the test tomorrow, yeah, it's gonna be memorize and write down 6 articles of Henry VIII.
Okay.
And why do I find that this is the most important thing that you need to take away? Because anytime anyone wants to take away your Catholic faith, that's what they're going to be going after. Pay attention. That's what Protestantism rejected, those 6 articles. We're going to read a little bit more than we can. If you write them down, first thing will be done tomorrow. That'll be it.
Can you repeat that, please?
Yes. On page, we're really underachieving here, but it's okay. On page 450, at the top half of the page, there are the statutes of the 6 articles which lay down the truths that Henry VIII was hanging on to in his orthodoxy. Orthodoxy means traditionally you're doing what has been done before you. And while he proclaimed himself head of a new church in England, and while he rejected the authority of the church, he equally rejected the Protestant heretics who were denying these 6 truths. Now, once Henry was gone and his young son Edward VI came in and was completely manipulated by Cromwell and Cranmer, they got rid of these articles and in fact wrote an anti-article and then brought in Protestantism a la Luther, but with the Anglican flavor. So I'd like to give you nuggets that you take away, and if you remember nothing else, I want you to remember these 6 things, because you water down these things or take these things away and you water down what makes Catholicism different in belief from other Christians. Okay? And our Lord said, Jesus said, not all who say, Lord, Lord, enter into the kingdom of heaven, but he who does the will of my Father. And we know that the will of the Father was to found the Catholic Church. So it gets confusing when you meet real life people who are really good and don't profess the right faith and don't believe the right things. You're like, I don't understand, blah, 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 blah. Do your best to convince them of these 6 things. So know them for tomorrow. I didn't want to leave you with destruction and mayhem, so we're building the church back up. And we're doing it, you remember, through the new order, the Society of Jesus, the Jesuits, St. Ignatius Loyola. Then we have the Dominicans and the Franciscans from the 1300s that are showing back up and doing missionary work. And we've got some success in the East. Okay? Because Europe has been ransacked. Germany, France, it's been ransacked by Protestantism, and up into Denmark, Norway, Sweden, Finland. Now we've got England and Ireland and Scotland. It all goes down. Well, we're going to renew, and once again, the renewal comes from individual, prayerful people who do penance and live austerely every single time. Yes.
Where does it actually say his 6 articles? Because it doesn't say
Well, it says what he confirms the truth of.
where, though. There's 2 places.
Lay down the truth of transubstantiation, sufficiency of communion under one kind, clerical celibacy, validity of the vow of chastity, the utility of private masses for the souls in purgatory, and the necessity of auricular confession. Those are the 6. But you know what? I will look it up and see if we can have like the official
No, those are fine. It's just there was another place that.
reference to it.
Yeah.
Okay, so now we get to, I'm on the bottom of 469, missions and missionaries in the New World. It's for us who can see all the flaws and the failings and the foibles of America. Sometimes we're down on our own country because we're morally pretty rotten right now. But it's interesting that with the revival, here comes America, and now we have an American in the Vatican, and we have Trump doing all kinds of things to influence the world. And you remember when we were praying for the election of the president, we were praying to Our Lady Empress of the Americas. So since the founding of America, while flawed, Our Lady has been interested in this country, and it does seem like there's some revival and hope coming, and it might be partially through America. Spanish America. In the New World discovered by Columbus, missionaries followed as eagerly in the wake of the explorers as they did in the Far East. There's a book called Columbus and Cortez, and the book is combating all of the misinformation that you get in today's revisionist history world about Columbus. But this book, and if you want to see it, I can share it with you. It's not that long of a book. It has reproduced the diary of Christopher Columbus. It's extensive. And every single entry has to do with, I mean, he wanted to found a new world, yes. But whenever he talks about the people in the new world, he talks about bringing Christ to these people. That was his #1 goal. bring Christ to these people who are savages. You know, he didn't come to a place where there were towns and town halls and meeting squares and churches and commerce, and he came to an area with tens of thousands of different tribes, not just thousands, tens of thousands of different tribes who all warred against each other, and none of which had established anything like a permanent city or town. And he found them, and he wanted to bring them to Christ. And so did the missionaries. They followed Columbus to Haiti and Cuba and Puerto Rico, 1493, Ponce de Leon to Florida, Balboa to the Pacific, Cortez to Mexico, Pizarro to Peru, Valdivia to Chile, De Soto to the Mississippi, and Coronado to New Mexico. You've heard of all those explorers? Yes, Pizarro, Valdivia, Cortez, and there's something about Cortez too. He started out trying to bring the faith. He ended up not. He got sucked in, but he also was trying to bring the faith to those people who were sacrificing babies and their temples. Just remember when they try to rewrite history and say, oh, the indigenous people, boo-hoo. They were killing their babies by cutting out their hearts, okay? Franciscans, Dominicans, and Carmelites were the first in the field, and to these were soon added the sons of Saint Ignatius. That means the Jesuits. Missions were established at once. Thousands of natives were baptized, and in less than 80 years, over 30 archdioceses and dioceses had been erected in the West Indies, in Mexico, Florida, Central America, and South America. I was wrong about California, by the way. It was Florida. Florida was, St. Augustine was the site of the first mass said in the Americas. Well, in North America. Is that right, Coco? North America? Do you remember from your St. Augustine stuff? Yes. Great saints added luster to the heroic bands of missionaries. Saint Louis Bertrand, a Spanish Dominican who landed in New Granada in 1562, baptized more than 25,000 pagans during the 8 years that he labored along the coasts of Colombia and Panama. He is venerated as the apostle of New Granada. Saint Francis Solanas, a Franciscan of Andalusia, worked for 27 years with wonderful success among the Indians of Peru, and no less successful by his saintly life and his preaching of penance among the Spanish inhabitants of Lima and Trujillo. In 1610, the Catalonian Jesuit St. Peter Claver landed in Cartagena, was ordained in 1616, and devoted the remainder of his days to alleviating the spiritual and bodily miseries of the Negro slaves, 300,000 of whom he baptized. Just for a little bit of contrast. It did say he alleviated the spiritual and bodily miseries of the slaves and then baptized them. He did not leave them in their spiritual error. He baptized them. The secular clergy were also represented among the saintly missionaries. Saint Turribius, a Spanish noble and professor of law at Salamanca, was appointed Archbishop of Lima, Peru in 1580. He traversed 50,000 miles in his diocese, teaching, baptizing, and confirming the natives. He founded the first American seminary. During his episcopate, the first saint was born on American soil, Saint Rose of Lima, 1586 to 1617, whose name is so truly symbolic of the perfume of her virtue. She was canonized in 1667. The identification of Christianity with the European conquistadors was a great drawback to the spread of Christianity. Both the Spanish and Portuguese adventurers, whom the tales of fabulous wealth of the New World had attracted to its shores, were often cruel and unjust to the Indians, trampled upon their rights as human beings, and enslaved them. Here's Pope Paul III again, in two briefs, condemned the nefarious practices and cruelties of the conquerors, and the missionaries, foremost among them, the Dominican Bartolome de las Casas, championed the cause of the natives. It was through the influence of Las Casas that the new laws for the Indies were promulgated in 1542, which saved the Indians from extermination and improved their condition considerably. Then we have Paraguay, and then we have Canada. So I'm skipping to page 473. The first successful missionary enterprise in North America was launched in Canada. And what country mostly sent missionaries to Canada?
France.
Mm-hmm. To this day, I think the official language of Quebec is French. Not Toronto, not Ottawa, but Quebec and Montreal. I think Montreal. Jacques Cartier had taken possession of Canada in 1535 in the name of Francis I of France, but no effort was made to settle or evangelize the territory till nearly 100 years later. Henry IV, stimulated by the example of Spain, which conquered immense territories through its missionaries, asked the Jesuits to begin the work in 1608. Two set out, but were imprisoned 2 years after by the English. In 1615, the Franciscans settled in Quebec at the request of Champlain, founder of that city, and began to evangelize the natives. In 1626, the Jesuits were called in to assist them. I think here comes Isaac Jogues and those guys. They founded a college at Quebec and from there undertook missionary work on a large scale. The Hurons, the Algonquins, the Montagnais were converted, villages were established. The Iroquois alone remained obstinate. I'm from upstate New York, and Rochester is on Lake Ontario, and above Lake Ontario is Canada. And the Iroquois, there were a lot of Iroquois in Rochester, and they were the fierce, bloodiest of the Indians. But we had Irondequoit was the name of a town right on the lake, and the high school there, my best friend from growing up went to Irondequoit High School. The Iroquois alone remained obstinate. They refused to profess a religion which the Hurons, their despised enemies from time immemorial, had embraced. Montreal was founded in 1642. In 1657, Sulpicians came to the infant colony and labored both as pastors and teachers in the colony and as missionaries amongst the Indians. From Canada, many missionaries penetrated into the territories now occupied by the United States, carried the gospel among the Indians who inhabited them. On the Atlantic coast, within the limits of the present state of Maine, the first Holy Mass was said on St. Croix Island in 1604 by Nicholas Aubry, a French priest who had accompanied the Sieur de Mont in an expedition to acquire territory for France. The mission which he established, however, was soon abandoned. There still exists a map made by Samuel de Champlain on which the site of the first chapel in New England is indicated. In 1611, Mass was offered up on Mount Desert Island by Father Peter Biard, also a Jesuit. 2 years later, a permanent settlement was attempted at Saint Sauveur near the present Bar Harbor. But the colony was attacked by a band of Protestants from Virginia, and the missionaries were ruthlessly dispersed. The Capuchin mission on the Penobscot in 1633 and the Jesuit mission in the Upper Kennebec were more successful and permanent, many Indians embracing the faith. Both missions were destroyed by expeditions of English soldiers sent for the purpose from Massachusetts in 1704, 1722, and 1724. The Protestants weren't always nice. During the last attack, the Venerable Sebastian Raleigh, profound scholar of the Indian dialects, was brutally killed and scalped with several of his flock at Norridgewock by the English and their pagan Mohawk allies. Here we go with the Jesuits in North America. Martyr blood had already been shed in other parts of the Indian mission field. Isaac Jogues, the first Catholic priest who ever came to Manhattan Island, and one of the first missionaries, as Bancroft remarks, to preach the gospel 1,000 miles in the interior, endured untold hardships and trials during his labors in the region of the Great Lakes. Captured by the Iroquois while returning to Quebec, he spent 13 months in the most abject slavery until he was rescued by the Dutch at Fort Orange, sent back to his native France. On a visit to Rome, Pope Urban VIII permitted him to say Mass in spite of the fact that 2 of his fingers of his right hand had been burnt off. It is not fitting, the pontiff declared, that Christ's martyr should not drink Christ's blood. In 1644, Jogues returned to Canada. Can you believe he went back? And in 1646 visited Aurysville, New York, to negotiate peace with the Iroquois. It was in the course of this journey that he bestowed upon the charming lake, now called after one of the Georges of England, the far more appropriate name, Lake of the Blessed Sacrament. Returning to the Iroquois a third time, he was captured at Lake George, tortured most inhumanly, and finally put to death. Rene Goupil, a lay brother and companion of Father Jogues, and John Lalande, who assisted him, received the crown of martyrdom about the same time as their heroic superior. So, living in New York, you know all of the upstate New York lakes like Lake Champlain, which was named after the explorer, and Lake George is at the base of the Adirondacks, and also where they had the Olympics, Lake Placid, which is pretty high up in the Adirondacks. So I never knew that Lake George, named after George III, was renamed Lake of the Blessed Sacrament. I didn't know that. Very interesting. 3 years later, after the death of Jogues, 2 other Jesuit missionaries, John de Babeuf and Gabriel Lalemant, fell victims to the cruelty of the fierce Iroquois tribe. Charles Garnier, whose angelic patience amid endless trials and sufferings had won him the title of Lamb, was slain by the Iroquois in 1649, after having labored with unremitting zeal among the Hurons for 14 years. Noel Chabanel, Gardner's companion among the Hurons, was murdered by a Huron renegade. Anthony Daniel was slain in the Iroquois attack on the Huron mission at Ihonatiria, and his body thrown into the burning chapel in which he had just said Mass. This glorious band of Jesuit martyrs of North America was beatified by Pope Pius XI in 1925 and canonized in 1930. Their feast is celebrated in the United States on the 26th of September. 2 missionary explorers. Then we had Catholic explorers including Jacques Marquette and Louis Hennepin. Have you heard of these people? Jacques Marquette? Marquette and Joliet? No?
No.
Jacques Marquette was born at Lyon, France in 1636. Joining the Jesuits at an early age, he was sent to the Canadian mission in 1666, where he labored successfully for several years on the southwest shore of Lake Superior. In 1673, he accompanied Louis Joliet on his voyage from Green Bay down the Wisconsin and Mississippi as far as the country below the entrance of the Arkansas River. Having accurately studied the general course of the Great Stream, he returned to Green Bay by way of the Illinois River, Chicago, and Lake Michigan. 2 years later, Marquette returned to preach to the Illinois Indians. He established the Immaculate Conception Mission at the original village of Kaskaskia near the present Utica. Utica is in New York. Sounds like there's another one. Exhausted by his labors, he died near Ludington, Michigan at the early age of 39 years. The state of Wisconsin has placed his statue in the Hall of Fame at Washington. Louis Hennepin, a Belgian Franciscan, came to Quebec in 1675 in the company of Robert Cavalier de La Salle, the noted explorer, and Francis de Montmorency Laval, the first bishop of Canada. After preaching at Quebec, Father Hennepin went to the Indian mission at Fort Frontenac and visited the country of the Mohawks. In 1679, he joined La Salle's second expedition to the west. It was an epic voyage of adventure and discovery. They journeyed from the Niagara River to Detroit. Can you picture this? It's all under Canada. It's all like the top of the United States. And the Great, is everyone familiar with the Great Lakes a little bit?
Yep.
No. Can you put up a picture of the Great Lakes?
Um,
We'll share you a screen of the Great Lakes.
in maps or
Yeah, or whatever, just. I don't know if they're gonna give you all the Great Lakes. Oh, yes, keep going up. Okay, so there's New York.
no, I
Yep.
no, I
There's, oh, you were good. Okay, so, find yourself in Washington and go directly north, just straight line north. Oh, no, too big, I mean, there, good.
like that.
From Washington, go directly north, you see Rochester? So that's Lake Ontario, and then next to it is Lake Erie, and then go north, and you've got Lake Michigan, and that's Lake Huron, right? Near Chicago?
Yeah, this Lake Michigan, I guess.
Lake
It is? Yeah.
Huron's to the right.
Oh,
Holmes. Huron, Ontario, Michigan, Erie, and Erie's the farthest to the east. Where's Lake Erie?
Here.
Yeah, okay, so Ontario, Erie, Huron's to the north, Michigan, and then Superior is up at the top. Superior's. So you see how they're doing all the waterways? That's how you get to people. People settle on the water. So all of this area is what we're talking about, but then they started, when you go down the Mississippi, can you find Wisconsin?
What's
Right there.
yeah, right here.
Okay, and then you see Madison and Rockford, and going straight down, you run into the Mississippi, and then they went straight down from the that's where we are, and we're sending missionaries all along. Okay, finally, the Council of Trent, this is what we need to get to, page 477. For years, both friends and foes of the papacy had demanded the convening of a general council. Pope Paul III, as we have seen, was determined to give effect to this demand. After many difficulties and delays, the council was opened at last in Trent on the 13th of December, 1545. It was prorogued several times, and it remained suspended for 10 years, so that it was not until the 3rd and 4th of December, 1563, that the last session was held, and the bishops were dismissed to their homes. 10 years for the council. On the 26th of January, Pope Pius IV confirmed the council by the bull Benedictus Deus. At the beginning of the council, the question was warmly debated whether the reform of the church should be taken in hand first, as the Emperor Charles V desired, in order to win over the Protestants, or whether the dogmatic decrees should take precedent. What would you say? Get your facts straight first, then give them to the people. It was finally decided that the work of defining the faith and of reforming discipline should proceed side by side. In the dogmatic decrees of the Catholic faith is usually first stated in a positive form, called capitula, and then the contrary errors are condemned in brief and precise terms, the canons. The capitula and the canons are of equal authority, both are definitions of faith. Against the Protestants, the council declared that scripture and tradition are the two sources of divine revelation, that all the books of the Old and New Testament are equally inspired because they have God for their author, and that the scriptures, in matters pertaining to faith and morals, cannot be interpreted against the authoritative interpretations of the church or against the unanimous consent of the fathers. The Latin translation of the Bible, known as the Vulgate, we know that, St. Jerome, is declared to be the only authentic Latin version and the one to be used in public in the Western Church. Because the King James version of the Bible, they edited it, right, to X out like the Maccabees, where we find proof for purgatory. Just gone. Maccabees is not in the King James Bible, not in the Protestant Bible. So not all Bibles are created equal. Just be smart and only use the Douay-Rheims. That's my advice to you as your religion teacher. Only the Douay-Rheims. The other dogmatic definitions concerned original sin, justification, the sacraments in general, and each sacrament in particular, the sacrifice of the Mass, purgatory, the invocation and veneration of the saints, the relics of the saints, sacred images, and indulgences. Clearly because those were the things that the Protestants were attacking, and as you know, they destroyed churches and statues and everything in Germany and in England, and then anywhere where the Protestants took over. The first thing they did was smash the churches. The Reformed decrees embraced a large part of Christian life and still form the basis of ecclesiastical discipline in the Latin Church. Some regard the laity exclusively. Thus, the indissolubility of the marriage bond is insisted upon. Matrimonial impediments are specified and classified. Clandestine marriages are declared invalid. Dueling is forbidden under pain of excommunication. More important still is the legislation affecting the clergy. The College of Cardinals should be representative of the whole church. Bishops should be obliged to live in their own diocese, to preach to their flocks, to make periodic visitations to their parishes. Diocesan and provincial synods should be held at regular intervals. Priests in charge of parishes should instruct the people in Christian doctrine. Seminaries should be established in each diocese for the education of the clergy. No bishops or priests or other clerics should be allowed to hold more than one benefice. The medieval practice of papal indulgence preachers or pardoners, which we'll remember from Canterbury Tales, is abolished. Strict laws regulate the admission of new members into a religious order, as well as the choice of superiors and the observance of the vows. The best comment on the work accomplished by the Council of Trent is contained in the Acts of the Vatican Council 1, 1869. The salutary providence of Christ has been most clearly manifested in the abundant fruits which have accrued to the Christian world from the ecumenical councils, and especially from that of Trent, though it was held in evil times. For the result has been that the sacred dogmas of religion have been more exactly defined and more fully stated. Errors have been condemned and repressed. Ecclesiastical discipline has been restored and placed on a firmer basis. Cultivation of knowledge and piety has been fostered among the clergy. Colleges have been founded to train youths for the clerical ranks. And morality has been revived among the Christian people by the more accurate instruction of the faithful and the greater frequentation of the sacraments. Other results are the closer union of the members with their visible head and an increase of vigor throughout the mystical body of Christ. The multiplication of religious congregations and other institutes of Christian piety, and a zeal that is constant, even unto death, for the propagation of the kingdom of Christ throughout the world. The decrees of the Council of Trent do not contain the complete Catholic faith, but only that portion of it which it thought necessary to define in answer to the heretical attacks of Luther, Zwingli, Calvin, and the other so-called reformers. The Council, however, ordered the preparation of a catechism containing an exposition of Christian doctrine, designed especially for the use of parish priests and other teachers of religion. It is usually called the Catechism of the Council of Trent. Every house should have one. Or the Roman Catechism, which was first published in 1566 by Pope Pius V. It brought about the much needed uniformity in the teaching of religion. Wow, all these saints we're missing out on. One more thing I want to say that came from the Council of Trent, which is important to all of you. I say Pope St. Pius V, you say Pius V.
I think SSPV, but that's wrong, right?
I say Pope St. Pius V, you say quo primum. And why do you say quo primum? What's quo primum? Nina's like, I don't know, but I'm gonna take a nap now.
No, I have allergies and my eyes are really itchy.
Oh.
Oh, isn't that the thing that says that no pope, like you can't change what the, I don't know, you know what I'm trying to say, I know what you're talking about.
So what was under attack by the Protestants was, among other things, and we have the doctrinal other things from the Council of Trent. What was under attack was the Mass, right? So they took the Mass and they chopped it up and served it Anglican style in the Book of Common Prayer. Don't go just. And okay, and so what Pope Pius V did was he codified the Mass. That means that we just said we had definitions and we had kind of a delineation of teachings. He also said we're going to take all of the, because communication wasn't what it was, what is not then what it is now. So people in certain areas have had little customs that cropped up regarding Mass, the saying of Mass. This is just in the Latin Church, not in the Eastern Rite. The Eastern Rite has liturgies that go back to St. John Chrysostom in the very early ages of the church, okay? But this is the 1500s, and the Protestants took an axe to the Mass. So he said, we need to codify it in such a way that it is made immemorial and nobody ever can touch it again. So he's the one who made the Missal the way you all know it when you attend a traditional Latin Mass from the 1500s. And his bull quo primum said, This is the Mass of the Catholic Church, and no one can touch it. And it may always be said by any priest anywhere. He said that, and we understand at that time why he said that. Because of the Protestants trying to force Catholic priests to become Protestant and say the Book of Common Prayer or whatever the other new ceremonies were that weren't Catholic. So he put it all in one book. It's called the Missal, and he codified it so that everyone's it's supposed to be uniform. Everyone in the Latin Church all over the world uses this Missal, and no one can take it away from you, and any priest at any time always has permission. In perpetuity were the words. That means forever and ever, forever. Do you see why this might be important to us today? Yes, you do. There we go. We're just going to read Pius V. I'm on page 484. Among the popes who did the most to carry out the reforms of the Council of Trent, 3, Pius V, Gregory XIII, and Sixtus V stand out most prominently. Pius was a Dominican, Sixtus a Franciscan, and Gregory belonged to the secular clergy. Pius V, the Dominican Pope. 1566 to 1572, the last canonized Pope. This book was written, boy, you gotta go back to the 1500s to find the last canonized Pope. Well, now we have St. Pius X. The last canon had entered the Dominican order in his early youth. From his first days of convent life, he had been remarkable for the strict observance of the holy rule, and he never relaxed in the least from his first fervor in this regard. With extreme reluctance, he accepted the papal dignity. He was deeply conscious of the heavy responsibility it laid upon him. It was not his ambition to be a great ruler, but as a true servant of the servants of God, to labor for the salvation of souls. Everyone could see how truly spiritual a man he was, how given to long prayers, to tears as well as to fasting, and to mortifications of the flesh, in spite of years and infirmities. Love of the crucified Savior was the impelling motive of all his actions. When he carried the Blessed Sacrament through the streets of Rome on the Feast of Corpus Christi, he was so wrapped in devotion, and his love for the hidden God shone so clearly on his countenance, that the people whispered to one another, "We have a saint as Pope." Immediately on his accession, Pius V undertook a thorough reform of the papal household, of every branch of the papal administration, and of the clergy and city of Rome. Every abuse was summarily corrected or punished. Scant allowance was made for sex, age, rank, or past services. All persons of bad life had to leave Rome. Here's an idea. The Eternal City began to put on an appearance of a vast monastery. A new generation of zealous priests replaced the worldly-minded, pleasure-seeking, benefice hunters of old. The Roman Catechism was placed in the hands of every priest. The Breviary was re-edited and its daily recitation enforced. To this day, traditional priests under pain of mortal sin have to say their divine office every day. Pius V failed in his efforts to bring back Scotland to the Catholic faith, but his bull of excommunication against Queen Elizabeth in 1571 aroused the English Catholics, it is true, from their lethargy, which had hung over them since the reign of Henry VIII. But it also procured, as Blessed Edmund Campion said, much severity in England and the heavy hand of Her Majesty against the Catholics. A final triumph was, however, reserved to the great pontiff. The victorious Ottoman armies, taking advantage of the disunion of Western Christendom, was threatening to overrun Europe. In this crisis, the Pope formed an alliance between himself, Philip II of Spain, and the Venetians. Don Juan of Austria was given command of the fleet of the Allies, and in the Battle of Lepanto, which you all know well, October 7th, 1571, the power of the Turk on the sea was broken forever. On the day of the battle, the Pope was discussing some business matters with the secretary. Suddenly, he lapsed into silence, went to his window, and opening the large shutters, was lost in thought as he gazed out into the void. Then recovering himself, he turned to the secretary and said, "It is not the time for doing business now. Let us go return thanks to God. Our Armada has even now defeated the Turkish fleet." Wow. You know. Okay, take 5 minutes. I'm back at 9 o'clock.